Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's May 15th, and we are so glad you're here at our MPF webinar for the month of May. This is our 49th webinar, Uri. Can you believe it?
Wow. No.
I know. I think we started when we were about 5 years old. It seems so long ago, but it seems like yesterday in a way.
Wow.
And
That is incredible.
so here we are, our
49.
49th show, and we've got a really hot topic and a great faculty. I can't think of people better to present this topic than leadership at the National Association of Law Placement, the foundation. They've done a lot of research as to why associates come, why they leave. And so we've got Fionna Hornblower. Did I pronounce your name correctly, Fionna? Hit me if I didn't.
Nope, that's fine. Fionna Trevelyan Hornblower.
And where are you today, Fionna?
I am in Boston, where it was lovely yesterday, but it is, as I look out the window, gray and cloudy today. Boo.
It's not going to snow, is it?
You know, we live in, now that we're in May, probably not. We've had a couple of those in my lifetime, but not a lot. So we're hoping that we are done with winter. And we were just chatting yesterday about whether we could actually pack up our parkas and boots.
I just put up my space heaters in the attic last weekend, so I hope we've seen the last of our cool weather. Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having us today.
We are delighted to have you. And where sit you this afternoon?
I'm in Minneapolis, where it is cloudy but a beautiful 70 degrees.
Minneapolis, Boston, and here's Skip Horne. Skip, where do you hang out?
Usually I'm in Southern California, where it's nice and sunny and warm all the time. Today I'm with you from lovely downtown Omaha, Nebraska.
Wow.
So
for a while there, I was going to be jealous of where you are in Southern California, but now that you mentioned, love Nebraska. Some of my favorite people are from Nebraska. And Uri, where are you today? You're back and forth. You're all over the place. Are you stateside or over?
I am stateside. I'm in Bergenfield, New Jersey, northern New Jersey. Beautiful 65 degrees, but raining.
Wow, so we've got a true pulse on the national weather forecast here.
We do.
I'm in Atlanta.
We
were a little rainy, drizzly, a little cool for this time of year, but we get plenty of heat later on in the summer, so we'll take all the cool we can get this time of year. We're at 1:59. We'll start in just a few minutes, and our topic today is retention reality. And we're going to take a look at some research recently conducted and published by the NALP Foundation on why associates stay. They call it the Stay Study. NALP has so many resources to help you attract, retain young talent. It is a vexing issue for many smaller mid-sized firms. So we are delighted to have you all with us today, and should be a very robust conversation. And we will get started very shortly. Uri, any announcements you want to make to our group as we assemble?
No. These webinars are great. We have one coming up in just a couple of weeks again, don't we? Every month.
Yes, we do. We are hanging tight on the third Wednesday of the month, 2 o'clock Eastern. Next month is an exception. It's Juneteenth on the third Wednesday. So we're moving up a day to Tuesday and are going to be taking a look at technology and what firm leaders, mid-sized firms need to be thinking about, because boy, is technology impacting the profession and will continue to do so. AI is probably the #2 hot topic, talent retention and AI. So I'm looking here at the clock again. We'll start shortly. We've got 130 managing partners, firm leaders registered for 2 days program, which is about on average. And coming out on the call, we will send a recording. This is being recorded on demand. You can share parts or all of it with your colleagues. Also, the handout materials. We'll take our polling results, compile them into a nice PowerPoint deck, send that off to you. Our friends at NALP are going to provide some additional resources we'll send to you in an email that will go out before the weekend. So we hope to help your firm on this vexing issue for many smaller mid-sized firms. I'm going to go ahead and get started, everybody. We're a few minutes after the hour. So let me go ahead and formally start our program. Welcome, everyone. to the MPF webinar series, 49th installment. We've been doing these, Uri and I, and our topic today is retention reality, what really matters for today's associate attorneys. And Uri, how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing excellent. We've had, you and I, 2 weeks of programs. And
I
this
know.
is on the road show, so this is great.
We were in New York doing a managing partner forum series of meetings, New York, New Jersey, and then we had our big conference in Atlanta and had about 120 managing partners. So this is our first webinar since those two big meetings, and we are delighted everybody is here. Uri, good to see you. Thanks as always for being with us. Uri, Senior Vice President at Ames and Goff. I do a little consulting and run these managing partner programs. Today's speakers, I'll ask them to say a brief introduction to us, is Fionna Hornblower, who's President and CEO of the NALP Foundation, and she's being joined by Jennifer Mandery, the Vice President for Research, and Skip Horne, the Vice President for Engagement at the NALP Foundation. So welcome, Fionna and company.
Thanks so much. We're delighted to be with you all and looking forward to sharing some of this intriguing data with you.
Well, we're looking forward to gobble it up, and there'll be lots of note taking and vote taking. And Jennifer, Skip, delighted to have you. We're gonna, as you all know, we have a very interactive format. We move fast, so we'll get started right away. Before we do, tell us what the NALP Foundation is all about.
Absolutely. So we are a 28-year-old nonprofit research foundation that focuses on the legal profession, particularly issues around retention, recruiting, diversity, the talent pipeline, management of lawyers, and access to law school. We have a number of recurring studies that we do on a regular basis. Many of you may be familiar with our annual update on associate hiring and attrition. That always gets a lot of attention as everybody wants to know what the attrition rate for the year is so that they can calibrate their own firms against that. Are they above, below, or just where they should be? We also do episodic research projects on issues that are top of mind for the legal profession. And the STAY study that John mentioned is one of those that we're going to be sharing with you today.
And one of your statements earlier, Fionna, begs the questions, can lawyers be managed?
Well, you know.
Is it even possible? You know, as you know, we have been working hard, Uri and I, to build communities managing partners. It's not easy leading lawyers, and there's so much change all around us. And this retention issue has really become a big one, particularly as we reset from COVID. And a lot of people want to work remotely, and the glue, the collaboration, you know, what do we do to bring that glue back? Before we get started, couple of plugs, our webinar series, the Fall Symposium. We're going to be presenting that in Chicago, October 8 and 9. It's by women, for women, empowering women in law firm leadership. And we've had a lot of interest in that program. Registration will open in the coming days. Our newsletter, we try to crank it out on Fridays, and other ways managing partners can collaborate and learn with and from each other. So a little plug on the Managing Partner Forum. Setting up today's webinar, we have 130 registered. We will send you all these results, polling questions as we collect them. Post-event, it will be recorded, and that'll be archived on our website. And importantly, we want your feedback on the program. We try to give, but the only thing we ask in return is tell us what you think. Good, bad, and different. We really thrive on your input. So when we hang up today, you'll be directed to a brief 4-question survey asking what you like, didn't like, topics for future. So please give us that feedback. We like to bring on the data. John, and as we set up our
got some data,
don't you? We'll bring on some data. So Uri?
What kind of data can you bring to this conversation, John?
Well, let me kick off how important this issue is. Recent conference, live polling technology. We had 105 managing partners from all over the country and Canada, and we asked from these issues, what are the top challenges facing your law firm? There's talent retention right at the top. Succession, profitability, but talent retention top of mind. Then we asked toward the end of this particular program, your top 3 concerns for the future of your law firm. There it is again, recruiting and retaining young lawyers. junior lawyers not stepping up. I just met with a firm this morning, and that was the issue. The young lawyers don't seem to want to become partners of our law firm. What do we do to get them engaged, interested in becoming an owner of the place? So we'll talk about some of these issues. Hopefully, Fiona, Skip, and Jennifer are going to give us all the answers so we can fix this at our firms. When you're registered, we always ask a couple of polling questions. Here's the billable hour keyword expectation your firm has for its associate attorneys. Fiona, I'll invite your comment on this result. This is 120 or so managing partners, mid-sized firms.
Yep. So this is typically a bell curve distribution that we see in a lot of different areas across the legal industry. It looks like the largest group is in the 1800 and just under 1900. That's lower than we would see in some of the largest firms, but again, a very typical bell curve there.
Are you seeing a trend up or down among the mid-market firms?
It has been creeping up, as we all know, over the years, but it's not sort of radically increasing right now.
The billable hour expectation has been creeping
Correct.
up, according to your data. Interesting.
Yeah. And it has been historically for many years now. It's been increasing incrementally.
We then asked at point of registration the clarity on becoming an equity partner at your law firm. And 19% say it's crystal clear, and others have varying degrees of opaqueness in the clarity of that path. Jennifer, any comment to that?
Well, I guess it may not be surprising that we have 53% saying it's a little misty, about a fifth saying a little murky. So I think with regard to some of the research that we have found and some of the information we'll be talking about today, just shedding some clarity on those progression steps.
Does this surprise you? What we're seeing here, the lack of clarity around the path to become an owner of a law firm?
I guess based back to our research, it is not super surprising to me.
And Skip, if you please feel to jump in here, if you have any comment, Fiona, please feel this. We're going to go back and forth and banter a bit. So please feel free to chime in if you have anything to contribute here. Uri, we've been asking this question for a long, long time. This is typically about what we see when we ask the managing partners. When we ask the associates the same question, it becomes even murkier. So making sure it's really, really clear, I think, is a good thing to be doing. A lot of firms, they hold the information close to the vest. And then we asked if your firm offers a formal associate training development program of any kind, and we made this easy. We have a formal firm-wide program in place. It's kind of hit or miss. It's up to the individual partners, or we really don't have much of a program. Skip, what you think of this?
Well, it's like Jennifer and Fiona have said, this kind of bears it out in the research that we've been doing, and we'll talk a little bit more about professional development as one of the factors that we took a look at in our stay study. That's something important to the associates, and they want to know, and it needs to be clearly articulated.
I think so. I run into this issue consistently, and the disconnect between the clarity that partners think they're presenting versus what the associates are receiving. Right. In terms of messaging around marketing, messaging around path to partner, there seems to be a disconnect between firm leaders and associates. I see it again and again. Our first live polling question, I like to kid, of course, that I live in Georgia. We know how to count votes here, and we can recount if necessary. So for the benefit of our panel, tell us quickly, audience, your firm size in terms of lawyer head count. And I see about 40% of you, 55% of you in. And once we get up to about 80%, I close the polls. And we are almost at that magic 80%. So here are our firm sizes represented today. We do, kind of mid-law, our sweet spot is 25 to say 150, 200 lawyers. And much of this data that NALP collects is specific to AmLaw, 200 firms, larger firms. but I think it can be very clearly extrapolated, extended to smaller and mid-sized firms. There's a lot to learn here, folks, as we go through today's program. So, Fionna, let me turn things over to you here and tell us what this should I stay or should I go study is all about.
Terrific. Thanks, John. So as I mentioned, one of the things that the foundation does is we take a pulse check of what is really going on in the legal profession, and then we figure out if there is some unique research or data that we can bring to bear that will help provide the basis for firm leaders to make actionable decisions. So one of the things that we heard a lot about, particularly over the last 2 years, were these extraordinarily high levels of associate attrition. It really created a talent swirl that was very difficult for firms of all size in the market to navigate. So we surveyed the waterfront, and while we have in our attrition study have information on why folks leave firms, there wasn't actually good data out there on why associates stay at firms. What are the really important stickiness factors to them in electing to whether to stay or leave the law firm that they are at? So we decided that we would develop this. So we conducted this stay study in the fall of last year. We developed it with a wonderful advisory board of talent management leaders from firms of all sizes. We released the results this past April. We conducted the data collection in a very short gate, as you can see, between early September and mid-October of last year. We were delighted we had 57 firms of all sizes across the country participate, and 3,374 associates shared that data with us. We used 3 different types of probes to make sure that we would get the most useful data possible. We used a relative ranking where associates could basically drag and drop from a list of 15 factors to identify what were most important to them. We also used empiric rankings in which the associates provided a rank on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, of how important a particular factor is for them in making that decision whether or not to stay at their law firm. And then we gave them open-ended prompts where they could provide narrative responses, and that's where you get a lot of the nuance and insights that really help illuminate the data that you get in the first 2 ways.
Fionna, for a little clarity, associates, I mean, are we talking about first, second, third, or the whole gamut of associates up to
all
more
the way
senior
up to
level?
all levels of seniority? And we slice the data in a number of different ways. We slice the data with firm size. By firm size, we'll be going through that as well. We slice it by level of seniority. We slice it by a whole host of demographic factors, gender, race, and ethnicity, and a whole variety of others.
And how many questions did you ask? How long would it take somebody to complete this survey?
It took under 10 minutes for the associates to complete the survey. You have to be very careful with their time. You know, they're cognizant of that as well.
This is a non-billable activity, isn't it?
Yeah. Non-billable activity.
Completing Fionna's survey, non-billable.
Yep. Yeah, but we received over 250,000 data points from the relative and empiric rankings and over 200 pages of narrative responses. So it's a really robust data set.
That is a lot of data, you know. We do data collection. Usually it's, you know, pretty dirty, you know, and pretty simple. So this is very sophisticated, nuanced data you all have collected from quite a substantial sample size. And this is U.S. firms, or does it carry into Canada, other countries as well?
We had a small number of Canadian participants as well. The bulk of the data is from the U.S. though.
Okay, beautiful. Let me slip to another polling question since we're focusing on stay. Why associates stay? We're going to ask our audience what they think, and then you could tell us what the real world is according to your data. So the question I'd like to present is a pick 2 from this list. We could only have 5 answers, the format for this technology. So we're going to ask our audience to pick what they believe to be the 2 top reasons associates stay at their firms. You like the hybrid work policy the firm affords, you like the bucks, you like the work-life balance, the professional development, training and such, or that clarity around a career path within the firm. And before we reveal these polling results, I'm going to ask you, Skip, I'm going to catch off your guard here, what you think the number 1 answer is going to be.
Oh, that's not fair. He knows it from
it's fair.
I know.
What do you think? What do you think the number 1 answer is going to be for the people on today's call?
Well, they probably won't surprise them, but once you dig into the data, you'll see that there's some nuance there. That's all I'll say. I don't want to steal.
Oh, come on. I got to pry an answer out of you. Come on. Give me one off the list, Skip.
Oh,
Well,
compensation. What do you think?
Compensation is important. Fiona, don't
Yep.
sleep on us. What do you think?
Well, I'm actually going to frame it up so that people know what the totality of the options were, because it's important for people to know what the associates were selected from.
I'm asking for a prediction.
No, I'm going to give you data. We're data geeks.
Y'all are deflecting. All right, I'll ask you. You'll tell me. What do you think the number one answer is?
Oh, I think people in this group are going to say work-life balance or something like that. Oh,
Yeah, they want the work-life balance and the big bucks.
right.
There's probably some trade-offs to that. But there you go, work-life balance. Does that surprise you, Fiona?
Nope.
Nope. It does me.
Nope.
I would have thought money. I would have thought money would top the list on this one. But let's move into your research here you want to share with us.
Terrific.
And why associates stay. I like to get creative with my graphics. So here we are coming back to the colony. Why do associates stay?
So as I mentioned, the STAY study looked at a whole variety of factors, and we just wanted to share those with folks so that when we are parsing through some of this data, you'll know that broader context. So we looked at 15 key factors that we identified and grouped them into these 5 areas: community, culture, and inclusion, compensation, benefits, and policies, location and reputation, professional development and growth, and work-life balance, then with all the 15 listed. And then for each of the 15, we also had additional sub-factors underneath each of those so that we could really probe what was driving the associates within each of those factors.
In hindsight, you set this up going in, the key factors. Are there any factors you might add to this list?
No, but we would love to hear from your folks if there are factors that they are interested in hearing, because we've gotten such significant interest in the study that we are contemplating whether we run it again in another year or two. So if there is additional data that people would find helpful, we are all ears on that front.
And there are a lot of these factors, I'll add, that intersect.
Yes.
There are places where these cross over. So you'll find hybrid work policies that'll show up in work-life balance. It shows up in firm policies. It shows up in culture.
Yep.
So a lot of these things do intersect. So it's we tried our best to kind of
it's funny when we first came out of COVID. That list I presented earlier, culture was the obsession. How do we rebuild the culture and the collaboration and collegiality and sharing and such when people have worked remotely, and now we got to bring it back and be intentional about it. Now we see the shift to retention, and our more recent surveys are honing in on profitability.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting how the priorities seem to evolve as we move through COVID and look forward to the future.
Well, retention is also a profitability driver, though, right? So
all of it. I think the profitability is an outcome of doing the right things for the right reasons over time. If the objective is to make more money and then back into that, I don't know. I think, profits are a byproduct of doing the right things, attracting the right people, all that good stuff. All right, walk us through what we're looking at here.
Yep.
I just plucked a few charts. Fiona sent me a lot of graphs and charts, and we couldn't cram them all in today's talk. I just plucked ones that I thought were really interesting, and tell us what we're seeing here in this chart.
Yep, and I think, the really intriguing thing is that the folks on this webinar actually picked these 3 as the top factors. So these are factors when they were ranked in that relative ranking that I mentioned. So the factor that had the highest scores for associates is compensation. Now, it is not just pursuit of the almighty dollar for these folks. It is compensation that they think is fair and that they think is market. The other interesting thing to look at when we look at the scores is you see that they value within the compensation factors salary 4.8 on a 5.0 scale, really, really high. The salary matters to them. Bonus is a little bit lower at 4.4. When we look at work-life balance, again, very high score, 4.7 on this. Associates saying that the firm's support for work-life balance is a really critical factor for them when assessing whether or not to stay at an organization. Drifts down a little bit when we look at remote work arrangements, down to 4.3. So again, as we saw with compensation, a 0.4 differential there. Still very high, up in the fours, but a difference between work-life balance and remote work arrangements. When we look at career path, though, we see a much greater spread. We see that there is real importance assigned by associates to opportunities for advancement and partnership. That goes back to that clear as mud, murky.
Yeah.
Right? So this is something that is really, really important to associates when they're deciding whether or not to stay at a firm. 4.5. When we look at the other factors, though, in career path, things like an alumni program or outplacement assistance, much less important to them. That's only scoring a 3.0. So as firms are thinking through what are some of the retention levers or mechanisms they can put into place, that clarity about those advancement really speaks to that 4.5. It may be less of a focus to think about alumni programs and outplacement when you're really trying to target what works and what's important with these associates.
So just to be clear, you took these and then subbed them. All right, within compensation, we've got benefits, we've got comp, benefits, policy, hybrid work.
Exactly.
And then within that, weight, what aspects of compensation are most important to you?
Exactly. So there are, so for
the base
that
salary is.
Yep, so for that factor, compensation, there's an overall score for compensation, and then there are the two sub-factors of salary and bonus underneath that. So for each of the factors, there's an overall factor score and then individual scores for each of the sub-factors.
And compensation number one overall across all categories, and we'll look at some of those categories in a second. Work-life balance, number 2 priority.
Yep.
And then clarity around the career path, number 3 priority.
Yep. The other interesting thing we saw in this data is that there is really no difference based on firm size for the rankings that we see for compensation, right? Salary is completely consistent across firm size bands, and we had firms from, you know, the 1 to 100 band all the way up to firms of 1,000 or more. We also saw in work-life balance, again, no significant difference based on firm size for the factor or sub-factors. In career path, we did see a little bit of differentiation there. We saw slightly lower importance scores at smaller firms for hybrid work, for example. But alternative career paths also slightly lower in smaller firms. And again, outplacement slightly lower in smaller firms as well. So a little bit of parsing that out, but for those other two factors, very, very consistent across firms of all sizes.
Fiona, what does it mean? What does it mean in work-life balance where people want work-life balance, they want support for it, but your lowest score there is remote work arrangements? That's surprising. People don't. Is that because they already got it, or it's not a concern? What do you think?
Yep. So the 4 factors we were looking at in work-life balance were firm support for work-life balance, practice group or team support for a work-life balance, flexible work arrangements, and remote work arrangements. So what you're seeing are the 2 ones at either end of that. The firm support, there we go, it's back up on the screen. Firm support, high, very, very high, 4.7. Remote work arrangements, again, anything above a 4 is still really important to associates. It's just that there is a distinction. They're looking at things in you know, slightly stacked ranked order there.
And to be clear, these are mostly big firms, big firm associates, correct?
Nope, 27% of the respondents were from firms of under 500. So a third of the associate population is what we categorize as small to mid-sized firms. And for the data breakouts, which are available in the report, we actually break it out for firms of 100 or fewer attorneys, and those scores are absolutely consistent with the ones up on the screen as well.
I just want to make sure our audience, so often we hear from our crowd that, you know, the AmLaw data is interesting. It's not relevant to me. And I just want to make sure we're clear on who is providing this data. We work, I'm sure, Uri, you do too, a lot of mid-sized firms consisting of big law refugees. They made that trade-off between the big bucks at big law and then come to a smaller firm where they can take on some of that work-life balance and are sacrificing compensation for the work-life balance. That's what brings them to the smaller firm.
Right, and that's exactly
Comment on
why
that?
we slice the data, because there are differentiated drivers when we look at it by firm size. But for those top two ones, compensation and work-life balance, as I mentioned, it's absolutely consistent across all the firm size cohorts.
And then there are differences in seniority too, as we've talked about, between the junior associates, the mid-levels, and the senior associates. There's some things that are going to be more important to those that are closer to partnership than those who are just at the beginning.
When I would think practice areas, I mean, insurance defense lawyers are just not in the same league as IP boutiques. You know, and associates where you've got engineers who went to law school who are doing very high value work, and more commoditized practices where, you know, the comp is not likely to be as high. But I love this little guy. I've been using him a lot. The associate, put him in when he's making rain, and in this case, there he is. Lots of opportunities, money's coming, and trying to find that right firm for you. You all, Skip, you asked me to put this question in, so let me go ahead and roll that up onto the screen and see what our audience has to say. Hide that one and go to this one, launch. Again, I could only give you 5 choices. We're asking for one answer here, which is set us up on this question, Fionna, because I had trouble trying to figure out what we're getting at here.
Right, so as I mentioned, we slice all of the data by things like firm size or seniority and demographic group, and we do see some differences in what is cited by some of those cohorts as more or less important, the scores that they provide. So we're going to be sharing with you where some of those divergences are, because it's important to think that through. If there are particular populations that you are concerned about, whether it's senior associates, women of color, you know, any particular cohort, when you slice the data the way that we do, you can start to be attentive to what might be most effective in addressing that particular group or in developing outreach to them.
So the question you're asking, where do you think the data is most variant? Is it among firm size? That's a big factor. Seniority or demographic? Is that what? Because we're giving them hybrid mentoring, lead policies, culture, things like that. I just want to make sure people understand the question and what we're looking for among these answers.
Great.
So hybrid workplace by firm size, hybrid workplace by demographic, women, men, that kind of thing, ethnicity. That's what we're looking at?
Yep, just where do you think the data is most variable?
Okay, and you're going to tell us, I think, in a few minutes. We're asking our crowd to predict where they think those variances are most pronounced. Yep. And Uri, I'm going to ask you where you think we deal with the same firm sizes generally. Where do you think the variances are most pronounced?
I think on the hybrid work policies or the leave policies. That's where I'm going.
Wrong answer. Culture and workflow management seem to be variants.
John, put the data up. John, put the data up.
Oh, I did.
So we can see how wrong I am.
I beat you without even showing the answers. That wasn't fair. But yeah. There we go. Firm culture varies differently depending on size, seniority, demographic. Talk to us, Fionna or Skip or Jennifer.
Let's go up the next slide so that we can actually show people where it varies. There we go. So we do see, as I mentioned, that there are variances in the data based on the cohort that you are looking at. And we thought it would be helpful to share with folks on the call where we see some of those divergences playing out. So for example, when we slice the data by race and ethnicity, we see mentoring, significant differences in the scores provided for different cohorts for that. For example, African American associates give very high scores, much higher than some of their other peers, to the importance of mentoring as a factor that they are looking at when choosing whether or not to stay at their organization. When we look at it by gender, we see women gave higher scores in terms of importance to things like leave policies and hybrid work policies, and interestingly to DEI issues than their male peers did. When you parse it out by seniority, this probably won't be surprising, but the interest in some of these things aligns with what people's level of seniority is. So opportunities for advancement, thinking about things like making partner, increase as someone becomes more senior within the organization. By contrast, alumni programs or outplacement and non-billable credit are more important to more junior folks in organizations. They're trying to make their hours. They're thinking about what my options be if this doesn't work out either by my choice or by the firm's choice. And then on firm size, we did see that the importance associates gave to hybrid work policies increased with firm size. So associates at larger firms were saying that was more important to them than associates at smaller firms were saying. Compensation also had a similar trajectory, where the highest scores were for the associates at the largest firms, as was the case with pro bono credit.
So when you floated this question out there and the results start coming in, you're analyzing them, did any surprises come to your researchers as
Jennifer's favorite part of it.
Jennifer, were there any surprises?
I can chime in here. So definitely we saw some things that were expected. We also saw some things that were unexpected. And one of those example would be, we did not see a lot of differences in the data by type of hire. So whether that associate joined their firm as entry level or whether they were a lateral one. So we really did find that to be quite surprising. We also did not find a lot of divergences in the data by region throughout the country. So we looked at different regions within the country, and for the most part, we did not see a lot of differences in those results. And again, just those no differences with compensation, I think that was pretty surprising to all of us, even based on firm size. It's just important across the board, all high scores.
Any Skip, what's your take on this chart we're looking at? What would you, if you were a managing partner of a 30-lawyer firm in Fargo, North Dakota, what should I be thinking about as I'm absorbing this?
Well, a factor that kind of, again, crosses several of these is the mentoring factor, and understanding that that the associates themselves are looking for that, whether it's formal or informal. We asked different questions about how that plays out within the firm. But I think that's really critical, because that's part of the...
I see a lot of law firms offering a mentor program, but it's terrible. It's poorly conceived. There's no training for the mentors. They just put it out there, and it ain't working for whatever reason. Around mentorship programs, do you have any guidance to a managing partner that wants to improve this experience for their associate attorneys?
So we actually do have some data in the slides that we're going to show you from the narrative responses that really speak to that kind of mentoring and connectivity. So we're going to hold our fire on that for just a moment. So we're not dodging the question, we're just delaying the response.
Okay. I have a nephew, he's working at a big firm in Florida, and it's like, I hate my mentor. That's what he says. Yet I'm forced to meet with this guy for lunch every month, and it's the worst lunch of the month. And he don't want to be there, I don't want to be there, and they got a mentoring program, but it's very poorly executed from his perspective as a sharp young associate.
Well, mentoring are put into place to level the playing field, because some partners are very good mentors innately and some are not, and some associates are very good at seeking out mentors and some are not. So it's really establishing a floor when you put a mentoring program into place and saying everyone should have some kind of access to this particular kind of dyad. But whether it is the most effective one or not speaks to the questions that you're raising, John. How well is hearing done? What are the expectations on both sides? Are there deliverables that people anticipate will actually come as a result of this connection?
Yeah, yes, the associates, they tend to gravitate around certain mentors. They're good teachers, they're good explainers, they're patient. And there are other partners that, reflect potential mentees. They just don't have the patience, so mentorship, a lot of efforts here, but I see a lot of poorly executed efforts. Uri, you got anything on mentorship?
I do, and I was just going to make a general comment about, I think this data is interesting for particularly our audience today, which is a lot of times small and mid-sized firms look out into the world of law and they say, well, big law's got this figured out. They get the compensation. Me at my little firm, no, we're going to struggle with it. But once we get to be a certain size, or if I was at a bigger firm, I wouldn't have those issues. And I think this data shows that that's not true, that it's really across the board. And I think for those who compete against big law, which all of our firms in a certain way do, it's interesting to see this data. So I think that's very intriguing.
We got some background noise, one of us on the call. I'm not sure who it is, but I can hear some background noise coming through. So I can isolate you if you want me to. But walk us through. There were a number of charts you included that had this sort of presentation, and I wasn't sure what to make of this. Fionna, walk me through this example of a chart that looks at work-life balance.
Yep, Jennifer is our data, so she's going to take us through this one and the next one.
So we kind of covered a little bit about the work-life balance in our earlier conversation with Fionna, but when we looked at that across the board, really we saw high scores. This was the top second most important highly ranked factor in associates' decisions to stay at their firm or remain at their firm. We look at the data on that dashboard on the right-hand side where we sliced the data by different cohorts. And really, again, we saw across the board that this was a highly rated in importance. We did see some differences or divergences by gender identity, as Fionna mentioned earlier, with females rating work-life balance higher in importance than their male colleagues did.
So this shows us that for work-life balance, gender identity is a big influencer as to how important that is to me?
Correct, correct. So, and it also shows on the first on that bar, this is on a 5-point scale. So it was rated overall a 4.7 on that 5-point scale. So we can see here, not only was it ranked highly, but also the importance on an individual basis when we're looking at the empirical data was also ranked highly.
Okay, should I advance to the next slide?
Great.
Sure, and this next slide shows importance for career path by firm size. So again, this was our third number ranked. So what this slide tells us is really this is very extremely important to associates across the board. All high scores overall across firms of all sizes, included firms of 100 or fewer, where it was a 4.3 on that 5-point scales. Associate scores for opportunities for advancement and partnership and clarity about the requirements for next steps for their advancement really did band tightly. Those scores were quite close between the different firm size segments, but there was an overall decrease in the importance scores for alternative career path as well as that alumni programming and outplacement assistance. So some of those factors to consider to our firm sizes when we look at that. Very large firms will have a huge number of alumni as well as more formal programs, where smaller firms have fewer alumni and smaller number of programs as well.
And what is alternative career path? Taking you in-house, taking you out of
Yeah,
law? What's that
exactly, exactly.
And does the firm provide alternative career paths? If you join us, we'll shepherd you in-house. I'm not sure I get what that
If
means.
if they are interested in exploring, if that associate is interested in exploring alternative career path.
Okay.
We find in a lot of our research, you know, when people leave their firms, they're leaving to go to another law firm that often is a peer firm and one that looks just like the one that they left. But there's also those who are leaving for other types of jobs, maybe in government, etc.
Yeah. We hear that frequently. They go in-house. They go to work for government where they get more stability, perhaps. They don't have the pressure to track time, go out and generate clients. And it's a little more comfortable and less pressure packed to go in-house or go to work for public sector. That seems to be, I see fairly periodically. And the alumni programs just aren't a big deal if you're working for a firm, 100 or fewer lawyers, and that's not going to hold me to your firm. Is that what?
Yeah, well,
Yes,
some of the larger have very, very involved alumni programs, and they have larger numbers, as we pointed out earlier, of alumni. So they've formalized that process. So that number is a little bit higher, but not really, not that much higher than the firm average across the board.
So back to money, and then work-life balance, and then path to partnership. Three most important criteria, generally speaking.
Mhm.
Okay. I love some of these quotes, and I have stayed at my firm because.
Yep. So as we mentioned, we had a number of open-ended questions that would prompt these narrative responses, and the responses fell into these sort of buckets of categories. Over and over again, the associates responded that the things that keep them at their firm are the work and the people, and the combination of the work and the people. So they feel like the culture aligns with them. They are excited by the work. They think they're developing and it's challenging. There are professional development opportunities for them. And the really interesting nuance on that one, and where I think smaller firms may have a distinct advantage, is what associates are really looking for is personalized individual attention to their personal career progression. Someone who is looking at them and saying, this is what you need to do to make the next steps, and I'm going to help you get there. We're going to walk through this together. Remote flexible work is something these associates love because it enables them to function at a very high level while addressing other things that may need attention in their lives, whether that's family, community involvement, or other things. Compensation. This is where we really saw some of the nuances on compensation. Compensation, as I said earlier, is not them chasing the highest dollar. Compensation for them is they want compensation to be fair and to be market. They define market and they understand that the market is driven by firm size and geography and type of practice, some of the issues that you were mentioning, John. So they are not expecting, if they are in a smaller or regional firm, to be making New York level salaries, but they do want it to reflect accurately the work that they are doing at the level that they are doing it in the location that they are doing it, and that it also reflects the toll it takes on other aspects of their lives. We are also fascinated by how important leadership is to these associates in this. It was very, very important to them that there be effective leadership that communicated frequently and transparently about what firm goals were, what the firm status is, how it's doing in achieving those goals, and if there need to be pivots, whether practice pivots or strategic or financial or other pivots, that those are clearly articulated to the associates and they understand why leadership is making these moves.
Boy, that's good guidance right there to the folks on the call, the importance of leadership. They want to see it. They want to see the vision, the future, the leadership. And what's interesting is within compensation, you said earlier, base salary is most important, more so than bonuses, benefits, 401k, health insurance, whatever. The base, by far the most important factor.
Important to them as well, but the highest scores were for the base salary, yes.
I had a client recently, and I met with the associates, and of course, the path to partner's not clear. And they said, you know what? This firm had a reputation for giving big bonuses, and that's what drew me. And they promised big bonuses. I'm not getting my big bonus. And there were some frustrated associates threatening to, leave. You promise things, bringing me over here. You're not delivering the goods, but that compensation, fairness. I like this little guy. Why associates leave. And let me first go to a polling. I love these little dog pictures. Let me go to a polling question to take us into this discussion, which is from this list below. What do you think is the number one reason associates leave their firms? Is it the market perception, the firm's fallen apart, or just not a great place to work? Is it they got a great hybrid policy or not? The culture is chasing me away, or pro bono community involvement? Talk to us about what this question is trying to get at.
This is really identifying what the risk factors are. So as we'll share in a moment, we asked these associates who by and large are, quite a happy bunch, right? They're engaged, they're working hard. What would be the things that would make them decide that they want to leave the organization that they're currently at? So if things shifted, what would those shifts be that would make them think about making a move?
What do you think number one's going to be when I reveal, Jennifer?
You can't ask us that. We know the data.
What do you think? Not from this group. What do you think?
From this group, I would think firm culture, probably.
I would agree.
I would agree too.
Okay.
Up
Yep.
76%. Woo!
Culture. I always hear it's your boss that chases you away from a law firm. The
Mhm.
person you report to, there's just a clash there. Might be great money, great culture. They're doing the mentoring, but my direct report, I just can't get along with him or her. And I hear that often is the number one reason why professionals leave the firms they work for. Can't get along with the boss. Where would that fall? A culture? Would that be a culture thing among these selections?
Yep.
So,
Okay.
John, the study was looking at retention, and that was all the empiric. But we did get a lot of data in the narrative responses about why folks would leave, and that's why we have a whole separate study where we look at attrition and the reasons people depart, and we can give you all kinds of great data on that. But we just wanted to see, well, what would you leave if? And we had these great open-ended responses, and yeah, culture is. You're more familiar with some of these.
So, the first two, again, we segmented the responses into sort of these general buckets. The first two will not be surprising because they're sort of related. So continuing to have the option to do remote or flexible work, which enables them to navigate their work-life balance. So if either of those things shifts in a negative direction for them, that becomes a risk factor that would make them think about leaving. The culture change, exactly what we're talking about. Like if the culture shifts from those people, they said, the people in the work, if the people that are really important to them leave and walk out the door, and that can be the partner with whom they do most of their work. It can be the people with whom they entered as associates, with whom they've formed really tight, cohort relationships, or people in other practice groups that it's really important to them to sort of cross-pollinate on work. If those people leave, it would make them think about starting to leave as well. And if there are fewer opportunities for them to actually develop as attorneys, if they see they're not getting that kind of personalized attention that we talked about earlier, if there aren't opportunities for them to continue to advance, or they can't see where the path might go that would help them advance, that would be something that would make them start thinking about leaving as well. And then interestingly, we all know that folks leave to go in-house. That wasn't surprising. But for a lot of the comments about going in-house, it was not simply the opportunity to go in-house. It was the opportunity to go in-house and have a leadership role. So what these folks are looking for is, again, that career path and that trajectory that takes them into leadership, whether it was within their current organization or if an opportunity arises elsewhere.
This came up, our programs New York last week, Uri, and here in Atlanta, where this profitability seems to be emerging as a top priority. We're going to really hone in on profitability by client, by practice, by timekeeper, by office, and we might find that some practice areas aren't all that profitable. And might that create some tensions to our collaborative family culture when we start to hone in on profitability? And you want to speak to us a little bit about that culture shift, and you have it right there that cares only about metrics.
Right. I think that's exactly right. Where profitability means different things to partners and associates, right? So the associates experience partners' concerns about profitability as there's less work, people are less available to me, I'm not developing, in the ways that I want to. That's slightly different from the leadership analysis of profitability, right?
And I think sharing some of the profits too. If he says, "Why should I work hard to enrich these partners who already have quite a nice income, and what's in it for me?" That old question. And the reward system and the bonus system when I hit milestones and things like that, and clarity around it. What can your firm do better to engage? You want to walk us through some of these highlights?
Absolutely. So, I think what we saw in the study results there is a real hunger for connectivity on associates' parts, right? They really want to know the people with whom they are working. They want to get to know them in social ways that are outside of, just the people that they're actually having working relationships with. They want that clarity that we've talked about a number of times on what the next steps are, professional advancement. They also want an understanding and an articulation of an understanding that there are conflicts with personal life, right? That they have no objection to working hard or working the hours, but that there are sometimes other things that need attention too. They want equitable work allocation to feel like it's not, sort of a star system where people get plucked from the hallway consistently to get all the plum assignments, but that there is some mechanism for ensuring that they are, again, developing. Firms always hate this, but they want an expansion of the billables designation. So if they're doing lots of other things like helping with recruiting or helping with community efforts, that those actually are formally recognized as well. And then again, just this real emphasis on the importance of leadership transparency and having communication that is frequent and effective and up to date, helping people understand why things are happening in their firm and why things may be changing.
Yeah, Fiona, I hear that one a lot. These kids are asking questions I wouldn't dare ask when I was at their place in career development. They have questions, they want answers. And I call it the mushroom theory of associate development. Keep them in the dark and feed them crap, and some of them will. That doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't. And it's a new generation with different priorities. And I think it's right here. And firms have to evolve and adapt if they want to hold these talented young lawyers, I think. Uri, anything to add here? What you're hearing from your crowd up in the tri-state area?
Yeah, well, I think your observation, John, is spot on. Everyone on this call today grew up under a different time. We didn't have these questions. We didn't have these, what we might call demands. But we see it all throughout the data today, and this is my last observation and then one comment, is that the observation is that what comes up, fair, path, clarity, transparency, these are all things that not only did we not get growing up, but this is what people want. So this is a little of a challenge, I think, for the group. And then just my last comment as we finish up, which is the small firms are actually the most able to change and to pivot and to embrace it, right? I mean, can you imagine clarifying a path to partnership at a 480 lawyer firm? Much, much harder than the 35 attorney firms here today. So that's the opportunity. That's the opportunity for those here today.
No, I think you're absolutely right, Uri, on that front. I mean, there are real advantages for smaller firms when you look at this data, right? When you hear about the people and the work, that is much more easily navigated in a smaller environment than a large where there's someone sitting in New York assigning something to someone in San Francisco and nary the twain shall meet. That personal attention, that connectivity, again, something that can be really effectively navigated in a smaller environment, as can accessible leadership, right? If you can walk down the hall and talk to someone and explain things, that's very different than, a firm-wide email blast or, a webinar that everybody hops on to hear what the grand poobah on high is sharing, right?
We, this is an example of the materials that Fiona and her team develop here. I mean, this is so rich in nuance and data. Really truly is, and this is just an example, and I'm trying to figure out what is this telling us. Can you walk it through real quick, and then I want a few closing observations from you guys before we.
This is pointing out that different groups have different levels of satisfaction and different experiences at their firms. One of the great ones, if you look under the most positive, the purple line at the top right, associates in firms of 100 or fewer attorneys, 86% are saying they're having a positive experience at that firm. That's great news for the folks on this call. We also see that a couple of other cohorts have, very high levels of satisfaction that they're reporting. Senior associates, Asian associates, white, Caucasian, Latinx. The flip side of that is that some other cohorts are reporting lower scores on this. So associates in that bucket of firms from 250 to 500, that's only a 77%, having these high levels of satisfaction. Junior associates, less satisfied than senior ones. That sort of makes sense, right? They're in the trenches, et cetera, and they're figuring out their ways within the organization. And troublingly, we do see Black and African American associates reporting lower levels of their experience at their firm.
Do we know why that is on the diversity front, African Americans?
Yeah, I mean, we can speculate, but we're the data geeks, so we don't speculate.
I know you guys won't go with my predictions. Yeah, let me look at that. But really interesting stuff here to take in as you figure out the culture you're offering. as you recruit and retain your talent. Boy, attrition is so expensive, especially for smaller firms when each individual is that much more important to the entire. Each individual is so important to the performance of the entire organization. We've asked these sorts of questions. They want the training around business development, leadership, and yet look at this. Only 32% are providing any kind of formal business development training. Even fewer are providing leadership training and presenting opportunities to chair a task force or be a deputy practice group head or something like that. So providing these opportunities within your firm to create that glue. So the final question I'm going to have for our panel is one piece of advice you would dispense to the leader of a mid-sized firm, and we define mid, I'm going to go with a 50 lawyer firm. Not operating on the coasts, but trying to work on the retention issues. And let me start here with Jennifer. One piece of advice you would dispense to a managing partner of a 50 lawyer firm.
Sure. I just think the clarity on associates and how they can advance within your organizations, making sure that you tailor those professional development issues to those individuals, as well as providing individual feedback, not cookie cutter feedback to those folks on how they can advance.
Thank you. Skip, what's your one single piece of guidance?
Sure. I'm probably a broken record, but I'll say hybrid work policies, having something that's specific yet fair, that works, and that also doesn't change every 2 to 3 months. We keep hearing from associates that these policies are always changing. They just get comfortable with the way it is, and then they change. And I know the environment changes somewhat, but we can't necessarily go back to where we were before. So we have to find some arrangement within this hybrid world that works for everyone.
We get into this conversation about what's required versus encouraged.
Yes.
If we have rules or rules, and without enforcement,
right,
they become guidelines. And clarity around the expectations and the rules. Fiona, what's your piece of advice?
Yeah, I'm going to go with communication because it just came out so strongly in the data, that real wish for transparency, as Jennifer said, and communication. This is a really bright, engaged cohort of young associate attorneys, right? And their talent is going to transform the profession and all of our organizations. And that's a good thing. They're going to push us to do things differently. As Yuri said, it's a very different thing than when I was, a junior associate, et cetera. But they're going to push us in ways that can help this profession really evolve and change in some very exciting ways. So I think, communicating, and that can be a two-way street, being open to hearing what they are suggesting or advocating for, as well as making sure to be very clear about what's going on and why things are happening.
Thank
you. And Uri, what's your guidance?
I think the biggest improvement has already been pointed out, the path to partnership, clarity, clarity, clarity. This group wants that. But one thing the methodology, I think, to interfacing the communication with your people, John, it's been your idea before, and I'll bring up an old John Remsenism, which is we all do exit interviews, do stay interviews. Go to your people and ask them, why do you stay? Sometimes it's a little scary, but the fact is, and I think the survey shows that, people have choices. Why do your key people stay? Ask them. You'll learn something, and they'll love that experience.
Employee satisfaction surveys, culture indexes. I've seen some firms set up those, culture indices and are really honing in on happy, satisfied employees, including associates, because they're loyal, they're productive, and they're your number one source of future recruits in many cases. So that's what firm leaders are to do, and we hope we've dispensed. If you just get one kernel of an idea of your hour with us and make it happen, your time is well spent. Real quick, you've got some resources. We're going to send the follow-up email with some links. There's a QR code. But boy, check out NALP, the NALP Foundation, and its offerings. Really rich stuff. And I've gotten to know a lot. I've always heard of your organization. I've known people who've been involved. But as I look at what you're doing here and the resources and the research, it is really good stuff. So this isn't the last we'll see of you at MPF conferences. So be tuned into your follow-up. We got our stuff going on. Give us your feedback to the session. Our friends at 9CAP do write-ups of these, recaps that we circulate. We want to thank them for supporting our webinars in that way. Fionna, Jennifer, Skip, thank you so much for being with us and for your preparation and your contributions to today's program. We really appreciate it. Hope it was good for you as it was for us.
Absolutely. Delighted to be with you. And anyone on the call should feel free to spin through our website. All the data that we shared, the reports are available up there. And you can always reach out to us with any questions as well.
There's some contact information. Again, all of this will be sent follow-up. If you want to follow through with Skip and Jennifer and Fionna, they'll be happy to talk more with you about this hot topic for leaders of smaller, mid-sized law firms. Well, Uri, that's a wrap. Number 49 under our belts. And good to be with you as always.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for number 50.
Thanks, everybody. Y'all have a great afternoon, and thank you for being with us.
I know.